Hey, no, the podcast is yours. You were all about the podcast.
Okay. All right. Hey, welcome to our podcast. Thanks for tuning in. My name is Matthew Rust. This is Eric Jones.
Welcome.
And the purpose of the podcast is to just talk about financial and economic strategies and ideas, creative solutions to some of the problems that all of us are facing. Eric and I specifically work with business owners. We met 8-ish months ago.
About 8, yeah. That's been that long.
And you've been working with business owners for how long prior to that?
About over 6 years.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I'd specialized in working with business owners in a slightly different way for a few years when we met, since 2016 or so, the end of 2016. And we found that we had a lot in common when it comes to finances and economics and ideas that will work for people to keep more of the money they make, to avoid financial pitfalls, or what I like to say, financial headwinds. The name of my business is Tailwind Wealth Strategies, and my idea is to help people overcome headwinds, turn those headwinds into financial tailwinds to accelerate them towards their financial goals. And Eric was right on board with that, dealing with it in a different way. And so tell us a little bit about what you do.
Well, so I work with businesses to help them understand options that they might not otherwise know about. And so when I first got into this profession, this industry, I was interested in coming up with solutions, really specializing in the area that the solutions that people don't typically know about, right? Mm-hmm. That are great solutions, but sometimes are overlooked, or maybe they're not combined in a way that people typically think about. Mm-hmm. And so that's actually when I first met Matt and he told me about what he did, I jumped right on board because that was right along with what I wanted to do. And it was just once I understood the concepts that Matt explained, I was like, that makes a lot of sense to me. And so I actually follow now in my business the principles that he teaches as well. Cool. in that. So, yeah.
So both of us want to help people understand some of the options they have that they might not know about. Typical financial planning and typical financial advice is contained within a certain wheelhouse, you might say. There are specific strategies and options that people know about because typical financial advising contains a certain number of these options and ideas and strategies. And those are different than what I call traditional financial systems and strategies and options for people. And so using some traditional strategies and applying those to things that we're dealing with these days, that's the whole goal. And in the end, helping people keep more of the money they make, helping families preserve and protect their wealth, helping business owners recapture overhead expenses, limit tax liability, helping them come up with creative solutions to keep their key employees, to offer better benefits for those employees. In the end, those employees are the lifeblood of those businesses, right?
That's true. When I think about what we do, I have to think about our families. And Matt here has a wonderful son who whenever I think about his family and his son, I always think, man, that has got to be one of the most kind-hearted little boys I know. He just is very kind-hearted. It seems like he has an overflowing amount of love for everybody and just loves to go up and give people hugs. And then they come over to our house, and we have 6 kids. And I think we smother him with our kids are. I always tell people, if you've never been to a zoo before, come to our house. You'll have the same experience. It's a lot of chaos, and so I think that we overwhelm him a little bit. But
it's chaotic
been great.
Love.
Yeah, it sure is.
There's a lot of love and fun there.
Yeah, more chaos than love, but it's great. And so what I was thinking is that when I think about our families and our wives and our children and grandchildren eventually, right, and where we're going, these principles are all about protecting the things that we love.
Yep.
These individuals that we care so much about. And for businesses, businesses are full of those people, those families who have kids and lives, and that's what we want to protect.
Yep, that's a great way to put it. We care a lot about our own freedoms, of course, but we also want to protect and preserve the freedoms of our families and the generations that are to come. I think that freedom has been on the mind of a lot of people lately. And so if there's anything we can do to help a person see and incorporate some new strategies that will give them additional freedom, particularly in the future, I think that those strategies are worth discussing. Something that's important for both of us is just having options and choices when it comes to how we save our money, how we keep our money, how we protect our financial resources, having choices and options available to us. It's very important today, but going forward, it might be more important than we understand that we have options so that we don't need to liquidate a particular asset or sell a business or sell the family farm to pay for some kind of a need. And having multiple options to allow us to still move when we're older, that I think is priceless. When I work with people who are in their 70s, for example, sometimes because they had most of their financial resources in one or two types of financial vehicles, they feel like they don't have as many options as they wish they had. Part of the reason I started my business is from speaking with those people and them looking for solutions for that concern and wishing that if they'd done something different 5 or even 20 years earlier, they'd be in a different position at that point. And it's hard to pivot and do something different when a person is 70. So there's a lot of preparatory work we can do to make sure that we all have the life that we've always dreamt of and the retirement that we've dreamt of. And then also that we're able to provide solutions to our family that we leave behind once we graduate this life.
You know, can I interject? So I was actually, my wife and kids and I, we like to spend some time exercising every night. We're trying to get into this habit of getting our kids to exercise, and most of the time they don't do it with us. But what we do is we put on a show, right? And then next to the TV we have this computer monitor, and we put on a exercise program routine. And so my wife and I get up, and we're, you know, it's lately it's been T25, right? And so we've been exercising for 25 minutes a day, and it's been great. And sometimes our kids actually do jump in and exercise with us and things like that. But the show that we just finished watching was Star Wars, the last Star Wars, right? Oh. Episode 9.
Okay.
So the Rise of Skywalker, right? And if you haven't seen that Star Wars episode, first of all, where have you been? But second, there's this culminating moment when everybody is, you know, they're fighting against this huge fleet of what they call the Final Order, right? And everything's against them. They're a small little group of people, and they're trying to fight against this evil that exists. And they say that you know, one of the things that they mentioned during the video, and that I think really makes the point to what you're trying to say, is that they say, you know what, all that the Final Order has to do, all that the dark side has to do in order to win is to make us think that we're alone, right? Once we start to believe and feel that we're alone, then that's when they start to win. And I think that's one of the things that I love about what we do. And to your point, you know, these 70-year-olds and these people that have lived their lives thinking and believing that they're protecting their future. One of the things that we just want them to know, that the reason why we're here today is so that people know that they are not alone, that we're here to help them out.
That's a good point. Right. And everything that I've learned, I learned from other people. And I've got mentors in the industry who have been doing this for almost 30 years in some cases. And we are not alone. I'm not alone. You're not alone. The advice that I offer people comes from so many other people who are teaching the same principles all across the country. And I think for the family in Blackfoot, Idaho, they might feel like they're the only ones thinking about these things. I don't think that around the neighborhood barbecue, when people are talking about finances at all, I think the conversation that comes up most is what the return was or the loss was on their stock portfolio, and that's kind of it, right? People are not talking about financial debt. They're not, well, complaining about it, but they're not talking about the national debt of our country. They're not talking about the unintended consequences of different bailouts and different government regulations that maybe are limiting their choices and having to look outside the government and outside typical advice to find other options. Those kind of topics don't come up, I don't think. At least not in most barbecues. Sometimes I'll bring that up and it clears the room. You know, who wants to talk about the national debt when you're grilling burgers?
Yeah. Well, you know, we all live our lives, right? Thinking, you know, I'm planning for this and I'm planning for this, but there's many things that we just don't think about. And not that we don't, you know, it's not that they're not important, it's that we don't want to think about them. I tell people all the time, you know, one of the products that is in our, you know, big category of options for employees is like a cancer plan. And people don't want to think about cancer. They think, if I think about it, I heard this just the other day, if I think about it, it's going to happen, right? If I start planning for it, it's going to happen. And that's, I think that's kind of the mentality that a lot of people have, is that I can't prepare for it, because if I do, once I start thinking about it, then it's going to happen. And the truth is that life's going to happen whether we think about it or not.
Yep.
And we've got to make sure that we take the time to consider options that are going to set us up for the most success later on in life.
Yeah,
right?
Absolutely. And whatever that situation is that comes up, whether it's cancer or some other health crisis or a financial crisis of some kind, there are people who prepare for it just in case it does happen. And there's people who don't prepare for it, right? And the truth of it is, a lot of those things are going to affect a lot of us. If we look at average numbers, for example, and you bring up cancer, most guys out there are going to experience some type of cancer. And especially if it runs in our families, it's not a question of if, it's kind of a question of when. And so that inspires me to ask myself, what can I do so that when I get cancer, what can I do to be in the kind of shape that allows me to have a better chance of beating it, right? If it's a financial situation, if it's the loss of a job, or something completely unexpected like the coronavirus and the months away from work for a lot of people, or other struggles associated with the economic shutdown, the quarantines that affected different businesses. Nobody saw that coming. But if we prepare for something like that, then we're going to be okay. I've got some friends and family members who are all about preparing for the zombie apocalypse. And initially I thought, that is so funny, because the realistic chance of zombies attacking us is pretty darn slim, right? But their response made so much sense to me. They said, Matt, if we're ready for zombies, we're ready for anything. And so they prepare for zombies, knowing that zombies aren't going to come, but something else will. And so if you're prepared for zombies, then you can handle anything.
I suppose it's that saying, right? You shoot for the stars, you might hit the mountain, right?
Yeah.
You shoot for the mountain, you might hit the valley.
Yeah.
So you might as well shoot for the stars, right?
Exactly. And so there's all kinds of different ways for us to prepare for all kinds of situations that we see on the horizon. And our expertise is preparing for situations that impact us financially, which is just about everything out there in one way or another. And helping a person have that financial security allows them to have security in other areas of life. In fact, some people ask me, well, Matt, these strategies, these vehicles, and these things that we could put in place and that we could implement, these tools, when it all comes crashing down, what good are they anyway? And I have to recognize that there's a chance that it all comes crashing down, right? When that happens, though, you might be the person who still has some kind of money to go and buy land and guns and fences and floodlights and a cow named Bessie and a bunch of chickens, right? And that's what you're going to be living off of, but you're one of those people who still had the funds to go and do that. And maybe for you, because you could get your funds quickly, maybe those funds, those dollars still had value. I've got Venezuelan bills sitting in my office to remind me that all it takes is a certain series of events before that currency becomes worthless. I saw just literally in the news maybe within the last week, maybe 2 weeks, Venezuela has published a 1 million Bolivar bill. They're publishing 200,000, 500,000, and a 1 million Bolivar bill.
So if you want to be a millionaire, go to Venezuela.
Go to Venezuela. It's very easy. And in fact, one of the articles that I saw said to be a millionaire in Venezuela, all you need is 53 cents.
53 cents?
Yeah. That's the value of that 1 million Bolivar bill.
Oh, wow.
Now, when I went independent and started my own agency in 2016, on my desk I had Venezuelan coins and a dollar bill folded in half. And that stack of coins equaled $50. And it was a stack of 5 and 10 Bolivar coins. And to think that now I literally would need 1 million Bolivars in order to equal that half a dollar. That's a profound impact on those people. So
and you have to wonder where are we going, right? Our country, you know, our dollar. I mean, we've obviously devalued the dollar multiple times so far, and we still have a lot of confidence in the dollar. But when is that going to change, right?
Yeah, I think that it is changing. If we look back through history, I think we see trends that lead us towards our future if nothing changes. Mm-hmm. And some of those trends have created a situation for us that may be insurmountable, realistically. The Congressional Budget Office, for example, for years has tried to predict when the cost of the national debt will be more than our gross domestic product. And we're getting very, very close to that time. They've been predicting it for a long time. And so we can see through history people talking about these scary things, I should say important. They're not always scary, but they're very important. It's very significant. When everything that the U.S. government collects in revenue, when all of that goes to pay the interest on our debt and none of the principal, that's an important moment in time. And we've been approaching that moment.
Now, Matt, I'd love to, because this is, I think, where one of your strengths lie, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. And I'm going to actually preface it with this is a movie-themed hour, right? But I'm going to actually bring up another movie here that I watched and has probably become one of my new favorites. Have you ever seen Mr. Smith Goes to Washington?
Oh, golly. A long time ago.
See, I hadn't watched it until recently, and so
Black and white Cary Grant?
Yeah, and what's his name?
Anyway, we'll post it in the comments or something.
Yeah, from A Wonderful Life. What's the...
oh my gosh.
Jimmy Stewart. Jimmy Stewart. That's who it is.
Thanks.
So he, of course, is this individual. If you don't remember, he's this individual that's one of the best guys you'd know. You know, the guy living down the street that's always a good neighbor. I mean, that's Jimmy Stewart, and he's always out there trying to help the boys in town. Teach them the principles of freedom and the Constitution and the Declaration of Independence are guiding principles, right? That he uses. And you look today at where we're at with the government, and how Biden is almost missing in action right now, right? Nobody's hearing from Biden at the moment. And it's going back to what I said earlier, that all that you have to do for the dark side to win is to make you think that you're alone. And so I'm actually kind of a little frustrated that Biden's not out there helping people understand where we're going as a country and where we're at and what the solutions are that we're addressing. Because it's making people feel like they're alone. And so anyway, in this movie, Mr. Smith Goes to Washington. So he actually did not campaign for office. They're trying to figure out who's going to take this next spot in the Senate, right? And so he sits down at the dinner table, and his boys are all like, "Oh, Mr. Smith, you need to do this." And this other senator has this decision to make because he doesn't want to put into office that there's the big company, big corporate individuals that basically run the newspaper, right? And so they're telling him who to put in office. He's like, no, I don't want to put that person in office, but I have to. They're controlling the government, right? And so so he comes up with this idea. Mr. Smith, he's going to be a good fit. So anyway, I'm not going to go into a lot of detail, but here's what I wanted to point out, and then I want to lead that into what some advice that you'd give, because I think that your expertise really fits in this area. Is that when Mr. Smith goes to Washington, totally naive about all the politics that exist in Washington, he goes there believing that, I'm just going to stand for freedom and we're going to promote these ideals, and it's great. That's what the government's for, is the freedom of the people and just helping the little guy, right? So he goes to Washington, and while he's there, of course, he learns that it's not everything that it's cooked up to be, right? And the person that he had believed in all this time ends up turning against him, because he ends up wanting to fight for these ideals that are contrary to this agenda, right? And anyway, so the end of the movie, I'm going to cut to the end. If you haven't seen it, you might want to block this out a little bit, right? But at the end of the movie, it's everybody against him, and these big corporate individuals are making him feel like he's alone. They're cutting off, like the newspapers, right? All the media avenues that existed at the time, they're cutting off anything.
Silenced.
Yeah, he's being silenced. And of course, you can see where the correlation exists to what's happening today, right? There's a lot of silencing, a lot of cancel culture going on. And anyway, so he's being silenced, and he gets up and he stands up, and this is, I'm going to turn the time over to you. I just want to make this one point as far as this is one thing that he says. He says, there's no compromise with truth. That's all I got up on this floor to say. When was it? A year ago, it seems like. Just get off the ground. That's all I ask. And then he goes on to say, and this is his voice is getting hoarse. He's trying to stand for these ideals, and they're trying to silence him. And so long as he's on the floor, right, so long as he's speaking, they can't make him sit down. And so he's basically, after 24 hours, he's been up, standing, talking. His voice is hoarse. He's giving it every last bit of effort he has to try to make things right in Washington. And so his voice is very hoarse. And he says, I guess this is just another lost cause, Mr. Payne. All you people don't know about lost causes. Mr. Payne does. He said once they were the only causes worth fighting for. And he fought for them once, and for the only reason any man ever fights for them, because of one plain simple rule: love thy neighbor. And that I feel like is what we're trying to do. We're trying to fight for lost causes, for people that maybe have given up hope a little bit. And I'd love to get your insight into the national debt, where we stand, and what type of causes we're truly fighting for.
Boy, I've got to go watch that movie again.
I know, it's a good one.
Inspiring.
It's like my new favorite.
I don't know if I can say that the federal budget is a lost cause or not. The deficit we're facing, we just were looking at it a few minutes ago, and $28 trillion of national debt, short-term national debt, is an awfully big number. This is, it just turned off on me. We'll pull this back up in just a minute. But $28 trillion, it's interesting to watch that debt clock and see those numbers actually turning. But comparing the numbers today to what it has been in the past, just before the pandemic hit, November of 2019, the national debt was at 23. Nope, I'm going to get this wrong. No, it was. It blows my mind to think that it was only 23 trillion. And now it's just over 28.
I remember actually you showing me the clock when we had first met, and showing me teaching me about some of these principles. And I remember seeing that, this was not too long ago. It was at like 26 trillion. I remember seeing that number, 26 trillion, and thinking about how big that was. And now it's at 28.
Yeah. So I don't know that I can say if it's hopeless or not. I do know that the previous Comptroller General, his name's David Walker, still speaks about this, but his job in Washington for about 10 years was to keep Congress abreast of where the debt sat. He headed up the Congressional Budget Office, and essentially he was the chief accountant for the government. And after so many years of telling them to stop overspending, we're just adding on more and more debt. He says, heck with y'all. And maybe he felt a little bit like Mr. Smith did in that movie. Maybe he felt like it's hopeless to try to talk to the bureaucrats about this. He went on tour around the country before the 2008 elections, and 60 Minutes caught wind of what he was doing, and they actually did a recording. You can find the recording on YouTube. We could put a link to that as well. But in this recording that was made prior to the 2008 elections, he's talking about the impact of the national debt and that short-term debt versus long-term. And I use the term short-term, long-term, but the long-term really is labeled as unfunded liabilities. And so we look at Social Security and Medicare and other obligations the government has to pay out, and the total there, 130 trillion roughly, something in that neighborhood. I'd have to pull it up to check. Some people argue that it's as high as 200 trillion, but either way, everybody agrees that it's way too big, and it's over $100 trillion of long-term debt. So is that hopeless? I don't know that there's anything I can do to change things in Washington. And we probably, as individuals, haven't been able to go and change anything in Washington for a long time. If the guy who's appointed to lead the Congressional Budget Office for 10 years, if he can't convince Congress to do something different, then I probably can't either. But where I can make a difference is in my community, maybe possibly in the state. But certainly within the lives of American families and American business owners. I don't know who's going to be watching these videos, but I've helped people across the country. My colleagues have helped people all across the country, literally every state, and I'm not the only one saying this. And so if somebody from somewhere else needs to speak to somebody locally, I can find them. But for here, people around here, and my family, your family, the people I know and care about, absolutely I can do something to help them. And this is not a lost cause by any means. There are so many options that people have available to them. The most common place for people to accumulate money for later has been the 401k for many, many years. And sometimes that's the only place that a person saves money. They might not have $500 in their local bank, and they contribute to their 401k. I don't know how big that is or isn't, but they don't have a resource they can go to pull money. In fact, it's interesting to note that it literally took an act of Congress during the pandemic. It took an act of Congress for average American families to go into their 401k and get money out, much needed money, out of their 401ks without having a penalty because of that. Congress passed legislation saying, okay, now you Americans can go get your money because we said so.
How nice of them.
Yep. And so I just think that people need to explore other options. I'm not saying that 401ks are bad in every situation. We can save that for another discussion. But exploring options and knowing that there are solutions out there to help combat whatever's coming down the road. And the people who have incorporated some of these ideas, when the pandemic hit, they weren't in such bad shape. I've had quite a few of my clients reach out to me and say, oh my gosh, if I hadn't done this, life would have been harder for me, for sure. Having access to that capital for a business owner becomes paramount. And having access to some kind of emergency savings is paramount. But it has to meet certain criteria, if you will. Wherever we save that money, we have to have access to it, but it also has to give us some kind of an interest rate. If not, then we are literally saving money, and because of the rate of inflation, we are losing value in that money that we're saving if it's not keeping up with inflation, right? So there aren't very many places for us to do that, but there are some out there, and we need to learn about them. So it certainly isn't hopeless for the American family.
Sometimes it might feel like
it does.
So, you know, I know that we've talked to a number of people who have felt like maybe they were, they had their 8 to 5 job, right? They were working and bringing home money. They were putting bacon on the table, but that's about all that they could afford, right? Was the bacon. And so
Yeah.
sometimes after doing that for day after day, week after week, year after year, and a lot of people feeling like they're not able to get ahead, and it might start to feel like a lost cause. But
Yeah, I think there are some inherent weaknesses in us as people. A lot of us aren't disciplined enough to really save money very aggressively. And even if we do save some money, we're not disciplined enough to leave it there. There's always something that we want. Boy, the companies that market things do a fantastic job of marketing those things. I've got a 4-year-old, so I know what it's like to want everything all the time. He never has enough toy cars or anything like that, right? And so sometimes when we start working with people, we have to help them understand that maybe you need to drive that old car for a little while longer. Accumulate some savings, don't go into debt. But a lot of people out there are saying that. There's no doubt Dave Ramsey, for example, has helped more people get out of debt than I have. There are different ways to accumulate and protect that wealth, though. Once you start to accumulate it, then I think that the American people need to know about those options. So I think that's what we're here for. When it comes right down to it, we want people to be better people, better employees or better business owners, better members of their family. We want them to be better people, and we want to help them improve their lives. We want them to feel a sense of freedom that maybe they haven't felt before discussing their options with us. I think that's what we're here for, really.
I agree. We work with families. We are a very strong solution for business owners, and making sure that business owners have the resources that they need to not only grow their business, but take care of their employees. And so that's what we're really focused on. Really enjoyed this conversation. I think that there's a lot here that sometimes it's really hard to narrow it down to, this is going to be the solution, right? This is everybody's
situation is different.
Exactly, and so I think that this was a good introduction to what we're able to do, and would love to talk to anybody and find a solution that would be a good fit for everybody. So we're planning on having these podcasts, right, once a week, and coming up with a different theme each week.
Yep.
And so we're looking forward to that.
There's plenty out there to talk about.
For sure.
For sure.
All right. Any final word?
Nope, I think I'm good.
Okay, great. Well, thank you for tuning in. We're excited to have you here, and we're excited to see where this goes. We have a lot that we'd love to share and talk about, and there's just so many options out there that a lot of people don't know about, and I think that's where what we'd like to share with people, to let them know that there's a cause out there worth fighting for. You just have to get up there, stand up and fight long enough. and things will work out. So thanks again, and see you next week.
Thanks.